16. After the Millennial Kingdom. In this chapter, Satan leads a final revolt. Satan is cast into the lake of fire. The second resurrection. The wicked dead are judged. The lake of fire. Satan leads a final revolt. The bottomless pit presently serves as the place of imprisonment of some demonic spirits. Luke 8:31, 2 Peter 2:4. The devil and all demonic spirits will be bound here for 1,000 years during Christ's millennial kingdom. Revelation 20:1-3. This quarantine will effectively remove a powerfully destructive and deceptive force in all areas of human life and thought during Christ's kingdom. Revelation 20:7-8 warns, however, that when the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be released from his prison and will come out to deceive the nations that are at the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them for battle. Their number is like the sand of the sea. He will move his forces against Jerusalem with fervor. Of course, deception has always been at the very heart of Satan's activities. He was a murderer from the beginning and has nothing to do with the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. John 8:44. So when he engages in deception, he is in character. Recall that he used a lie to bring spiritual and physical death to humankind. See Genesis 3:4-13. 1 John 3:8-10-15. Who will join sides with Satan? Even though the millennium will involve the perfect government of Christ, it will also include mortal and fallen human beings. To be sure, Matthew 25:31-46 is clear that only believers are invited into Christ's millennial kingdom. But these people will give birth to babies and raise children, some of whom will not necessarily choose to follow Jesus Christ. As long as they do not externally rebel against the government of Christ, they are permitted to live during the millennial kingdom. But all outward rebellion will be stopped instantly. When Satan is released at the end of the millennium, he will lead many of these unbelievers astray in a massive rebellion against Christ. As the text says, their number is like the sand of the sea. Revelation 20:8. This will represent Satan's last stand. The attack against Jerusalem nullified. Jerusalem, the headquarters of Christ's government throughout the millennial kingdom, Isaiah 2:1-5, will be the target city of the satanic revolt. Fire instantly comes down upon the invaders. Revelation 20:9. A common mode of God's judgment. See Genesis 19:24, Exodus 9:23-24, Leviticus 9:24, 10:2, Numbers 11:1, 16:35, 26:10, 1 Kings 18:38. 2 Kings 1:10-12-14. 1 Chronicles 21:26. 2 Chronicles 7:1-3. Psalm 11:6. The rebellion is squashed instantly. It had no chance of success. A clarification on Gog and Magog. Earlier in the book, I noted that the Ezekiel invasion against Israel by Russia, Iran, Sudan, Turkey, and a number of other Muslim nations will likely take place prior to the tribulation period, Ezekiel 38 through 39. Some interpreters, however, believe this invasion must take place after the millennial kingdom because Revelation 20:7 through 8 mentions Gog and Magog. In both cases, a large number of soldiers are mentioned. In the Ezekiel invasion, we read that many peoples are with you, Ezekiel 38:6-15. Likewise, the invasion force mentioned in Revelation is massive, for their number is like the sand of the sea, Revelation 20:8. As well, in both cases, God is the one who defeats the invaders, Ezekiel 39:3 through 6, Revelation 20:9. But this view is problematic on several levels. Foundationally, the chronology is all wrong. The invasion described in Ezekiel 38 through 39 is part of a larger section of Ezekiel's book that deals with the restoration of Israel, chapters 33 through 39. This is followed by another large section of Ezekiel's book that describes the Jewish millennial temple and the restoration of sacrifices, chapters 40 through 48. In other words, Ezekiel's invasion is before the millennial kingdom. By contrast, the invasion described in Revelation 20:7 through 10 takes place after the millennial kingdom. So these invasions are separated by 1,000 years. The 7 months required to bury dead bodies following the Ezekiel invasion doesn't make sense in a scenario at the end of the millennial kingdom. Think about it. In Ezekiel's scenario, the Israelites spend 7 hard months burying the wicked dead who invaded them. In the Revelation scenario, the wicked dead are resurrected in order to take part in the great white throne judgment and be thrown into the lake of fire. Besides, Revelation 29 tells us that fire came down from heaven and consumed them. There won't be any bodies left to bury because they'll all be incinerated. Further, the next events in the book of Revelation are the great white throne judgment and the beginning of the eternal state, Revelation 21. This naturally brings up the problem of the burning of weapons for 7 years. If this invasion takes place at the end of the millennial kingdom, then the burning of weapons would have to go beyond the millennial kingdom and into the eternal state, which doesn't make any sense at all. We can also observe that in the Ezekiel invasion, a coalition of localized nations, Russia and a number of Muslim nations, invade from the north. The invasion at the end of the millennium is by a broader coalition, nations that are at the 4 corners of the earth, Revelation 20:8. Still further, the invasion prophesied by Ezekiel occurs relatively soon after Israel's rebirth as a nation and the ingathering of Jewish people from around the world, Ezekiel 36 through 37. The invasion mentioned in Revelation 20:7 through 10, by contrast, occurs after Jesus has been reigning on the earth for 1,000 years. As well, in Ezekiel, the invasion will be the catalyst God will use to draw Israel to himself. See Ezekiel 39:7, 22 through 29, and to put an end to its captivity. The battle in Revelation 20, however, will occur after Israel has been faithful to her God and has enjoyed his blessings for 1,000 years. But if these are 2 separate invasions, why did the Apostle John use the terms Gog and Magog to describe the postmillennial satanic invasion against Jerusalem? It seems likely that John was simply using the terms Gog and Magog as a shorthand metaphor, much as we do today. For example, the term Wall Street has come to metaphorically refer to the stock market. Likewise, in New Testament times, terms like Corinthian and Nazarene came to metaphorically refer to people with less than desirable qualities. Whether among modern people or people in New Testament times, the meaning of these words are clear to the hearers. Likewise, when John used the terms Gog and Magog in Revelation 20, 7 through 10, his readers no doubt immediately drew the right connection and understood that this invasion at the end of the millennium would be similar to what Ezekiel described. A confederation of nations will attack Israel but not succeed. In other words, this was to be a Gog and Magog like invasion. Satan is cast into the lake of fire. Revelation 20:10 tells us that following the final revolt against Christ, the devil who had deceived the saints was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet were, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Notice that all three persons of the satanic trinity, Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet, will suffer the same dire destiny. More specifically, the Antichrist and the false prophet will be thrown into the lake of fire prior to the beginning of the millennial kingdom. They will have been burning there for 1,000 years when Satan joins them, and all three will continue to burn for all eternity. They will receive their just due. Notice also that Satan is not the only fallen angel who will be judged and confined to the lake of fire. All demons who have served under him will also be judged. Matthew 25:41 refers to the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. See also 2 Peter 2:4, Jude 6. The demonic spirits who have been harassing Christians throughout the ages will one day receive a just judgment. The second resurrection. Scripture is clear that those who will participate in the great white throne judgment, that is, the wicked dead, will be resurrected to judgment. Jesus himself affirmed that a time is coming when all who are in their graves will hear his voice and come out. Those who have done good will rise to live, and those who have done evil will rise to be condemned. John 5:28 through 29, NIV. To clarify, Jesus is not teaching that there is just one general resurrection that will take place at the end of time. Contrary to this idea, the scriptures refer to two resurrections. Revelation 20:5 through 6, 11 through 15. The first resurrection is the resurrection of the saved, and the second resurrection is the resurrection of the wicked, unsaved. We can be even more specific. The term first resurrection refers to all the resurrections of the righteous, even though they are widely separated in time. One resurrection of the righteous occurs at the rapture, before the tribulation period. 1 Thessalonians 4:16. Another at the end of the tribulation period. Revelation 20:4. And still another at the end of the 1,000-year millennial kingdom. They are all first, in the sense of being before the second, final resurrection of the wicked. Accordingly, the term first resurrection applies to all the resurrections of the saints, regardless of when they occur, including the resurrection of Christ himself. This is a wondrous resurrection, for God's people will now have bodies in which the perishable has become imperishable, and the mortal has become immortal. These bodies will be specially designed to enable us to live directly in the presence of God for all eternity, never getting sick and never dying. The second resurrection, by contrast, is an awful spectacle. All the unsaved of all time will be resurrected at the end of Christ's millennial kingdom and be judged at the great white throne judgment. Revelation 20:11 through 15. The bodies of the unsaved will also be imperishable and immortal. Their bodies will be eternal bodies, and though they will suffer the fires of hell, they will not burn up, but will last for all eternity in an environment of suffering. How horrific are the eternal consequences for choosing against Christ? The wicked dead are judged. Unlike believers, whose judgment deals only with rewards and loss of rewards, unbelievers face a horrific judgment that leads to their being cast into the lake of fire. As we have seen, this is the great white throne judgment. Revelation 20:11 through 15. Christ himself will judge the unsaved dead of all time. The judgment takes place after the millennial kingdom, Christ's 1,000-year reign on the earth. We know that this judgment takes place after the millennial kingdom, for Revelation 20, after describing the millennium, states, "Then I saw a great white throne, and him who was seated on it." Verse 11. In other words, the millennium first takes place, and the judgment follows. Those who face Christ at this judgment will be judged on the basis of their works. Verses 12 through 13. It is critical to understand that they actually appear at this judgment because they are already unsaved. This judgment will not separate believers from unbelievers, for all who will experience it will have already made the choice during their lifetimes to reject God. Once they are before the divine judge, they are judged according to their works, not only to justify their condemnation, but also to determine the degree to which each person should be punished throughout eternity. When Christ opens the book of life, no name of anyone present at the great white throne judgment is in it. Their names do not appear in the book of life because they have rejected the source of life, Jesus Christ. Because they rejected the source of life, they are cast into the lake of fire, which constitutes the second death, verse 14, and involves eternal separation from God. All those who are judged at the great white throne judgments have a horrible destiny ahead that includes weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 13:41 through 42. Condemnation, Matthew 12:36 through 37. Destruction, Philippians 1:28. Eternal punishment, Matthew 25:46. Separation from God's presence, 2 Thessalonians 1:8 through 9. And trouble and distress, Romans 2:9. Nevertheless, the scriptures also indicate that there will be degrees of punishment in hell. Matthew 10:15, 16:27, Luke 12:47 through 48, Revelation 20:12 through 13, 22:12. These degrees of punishment will be determined at the great white throne judgment when Christ examines each person with his penetrating eyes. Common observation shows that unsaved people vary as much in their quality of life as saved people do. For example, some saved people are spiritual and charitable, and other saved people are carnal and unloving. Some unbelievers are terribly evil, like Hitler, while others, such as unbelieving moralists, are much less evil. Just as believers have varied responses to God's law and will have corresponding rewards in heaven, so unbelievers have various responses to God's law and therefore will have corresponding experiences in their punishment in hell. Just as there are degrees of rewards in heaven, So there are degrees of punishment in hell. The great white throne judgment will apportion perfectly fair judgments against the wicked dead. The lake of fire. The lake of fire will be the eternal abode of Satan, demons, the Antichrist, the false prophet, and unbelievers throughout all history. Revelation 19:20. 10 through 15. It will be populated by unsaved human beings following the great white throne judgment. All residents will be tormented day and night forever and ever. It is eternal. The lake of fire is another term for hell. The scripture assures us that hell is a real place, but hell was not part of God's original creation, which he called good. Genesis 1. Hell was created later to accommodate the banishment of Satan and his fallen angels who rebelled against God. Matthew 25:41. Human beings who reject Christ will join Satan and his fallen angels in this infernal place of suffering. Scripture describes the destiny of the wicked as a fiery furnace. Jesus said that in this fiery furnace would be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew 13:42. This weeping will be caused by the environment, the company, the remorse and guilt, and the shame that afflicts all who are in hell. Scripture uses a number of other terms to describe the horrors of hell, including unquenchable fire, Mark 9:47 through 48. The fiery lake of burning sulfur, Revelation 19:20. Eternal fire, Matthew 18:8. Eternal punishment, Matthew 25:46. Destruction, Matthew 7:13. Everlasting destruction, 2 Thessalonians 1:8 through 9. The place of weeping and gnashing of teeth, Matthew 13:42. And the second death, Revelation 20:14. The horror of hell is inconceivable to the human mind. What precisely is the fire of hell, or lake of fire? Some believe it is literal. Indeed, that may very well be the case. Others believe fire is a metaphor for the great wrath of God. Scripture commonly uses this image. The Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. Deuteronomy 4:24. God is a consuming fire. Hebrews 12:29. His wrath is poured out like fire. Nahum 1:6. Who can stand when he appears? For he will be like a refiner's fire. Malachi 3:2. God said, my wrath will flare up and burn like fire because of the evil you have done. Burn with no one to quench it. Jeremiah 4:4, NIV. How awful is the fiery wrath of God! The best English translations of the Old Testament don't include the word hell. Instead, they transliterate the Hebrew word Sheol. Sheol can have different meanings in different contexts. Sometimes the word means grave. Other times it refers to the place of departed people in contrast to the state of living people. The Old Testament portrays Sheol as a place of horror, Psalm 55:15, and punishment, Job 24:19, Psalm 9:17. When we get to the New Testament, we find that a number of words relate to the doctrine of hell. Hades seems to be the New Testament counterpart to Sheol. The rich man endured great sufferings in Hades, Luke 16:23. However, this was an intermediate state and not the rich man's eternal destiny. Hades is a temporary abode and will one day be cast into the lake of fire. In the future, the wicked in Hades will be raised from the dead and judged at the great white throne judgment. They will then be cast into the lake of fire, which will be their permanent place of suffering throughout all eternity. Another word related to the concept of hell is Gehenna, Matthew 10:28. This word has an interesting history. For several generations, ancient Israel committed atrocities in the valley of Ben Hinnom, including human sacrifices and even the sacrifice of children. 2 Kings 10, 2 Chronicles 28:3, 33:6, Jeremiah 32:35. The unfortunate victims were sacrificed to the false Moabite god Molech. Jeremiah appropriately called this valley a valley of slaughter. Jeremiah 7:31 through 34. Eventually, the valley came to be used as a public rubbish dump into which all the filth in Jerusalem was poured. Not only garbage, but also the bodies of dead animals and the corpses of criminals were thrown on the heap, where they perpetually burned. The valley fires never stopped burning, and there was always a good meal for a hungry worm. This place was originally called, in the Hebrew, Gegen Hinnom, the Valley of the Sons of Hinnom. It was eventually shortened to the name Gehinnom. The Greek translation of this Hebrew phrase is Gehenna. It became an appropriate and graphic term for the reality of hell. Jesus himself used the word 11 times in reference to the eternal place of suffering of unredeemed humanity.